Hello, all. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm joined by my friend and astrologer writer Rok from Slovenia, from beautiful Slovenia. So, thanks, Rok, for joining.
Yeah, thanks for your invitation.
Yeah,
Thanks, Aswin.
I think we've been having a lot of conversation offline via Facebook and stuff. So, it's been quite a while since we kind of got together. And immediately, I think we kind of jumped into the topic that we're going to discuss today and for some more episodes, if I'm not wrong. So, vargas and the usage of vargas or divisional charts in Vedic astrology by current generation or the postmodern era of Vedic astrologers. So if kind of everything is falling in place or if things are kind of not in alignment with what the classics said, and as we had a discussion, classics did not have much to talk about how the vargas need to be used, and I think you had another brief discussion or similar kind of talk with Lars on his channel on the usage of divisional charts and how things are being done. And I think you gave a lot of importance to Hora chart there. So I just wanted to have a bird's eye view of how things are going and then get into the specifics of how we can use the Varga charts or how we can interpret what the classics said, or at least how we can interpret or do something close to what classics might have said. So I think there is fault of interpretation in what is happening today. So what's your take on that?
Yes. Well, where to start? Okay. Yeah. When I first started to study Vedic astrology, this was one of the things that was like immediately almost scary, seeing all these divisional charts and so many. I could read so many opinions about how this should be used. Some people were just basically using them for assessing dignity of the planet. Some people were using them as entirely separate charts, and they were reading aspects and counting houses and everything. And especially this later approach of using them as separate charts can be really, so many things to interpret, because we already have the main chart to interpret, and it's already quite a complex thing. It's not so easy. And then we have all these extra charts, and yeah, one actually can get quite lost in them very easily. So eventually I just wanted to, make it clear for myself what's it all about. And I just decided to really dive into it, to read the classics, to see what the classical texts have to say about the use of the vargas. And I also searched throughout the internet to read various articles from different astrologers, how they approach the matter. And actually it's while today many people think that, okay, the approach that we have today, reading the divisions as charts is like the standard Jyotish practice. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. Because the classical texts do not even hint towards the use of the vargas as charts, which is very interesting. I mean, it was a surprise for me because I hoped I will find some instructions in that direction, but I just couldn't. The only place I could find not really concrete instructions, but more like hints towards the use of varga charts is in Jaimini Upadesha Sutra, because he introduces so many techniques that are done in the vargas. So then there it's quite clear that it should be done so that the varga chart is made, and then we count signs from a certain point and so on. So yeah, what we have today is basically a lot of experimentation, as far as I can tell. And astrologers are trying different things. Some are using even the cusps, the house cusps in the vargas. Some are counting houses, some are not, some are just using for specific techniques. So there's not really a uniform approach as one would believe. And furthermore, today Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra is kind of considered as the default Jyotish text. Because of this, we usually read, when one searches for divisional charts or vargas on the internet, usually we find the description of Shodasha Varga from Parashara Hora Shastra. But this is very specific only to this text. If you read, for example, Brihajataka of Varahamihira or Sravali of Kalyanavarma, they do not talk about any vargas that are higher than Dvadashamsha. Basically, Varahamihira uses only 6 vargas, including the Rashi chart. So he uses Hora, Drekana, Trimsamsha, then Navamsha and Dvadasamsha. Yeah, and Kalyanavarma only adds the Saptamsha.
Yeah, and there is a lot of misconception, or I don't know if it is misconception, but there is a lot of additions in terms of specific topics assigned to specific divisional charts. For example, Navamsa has been taken to marriage, and Saptamsha has been interestingly attached to children and stuff, which is pretty much not available in any of the classical texts that we come up with.
Absolutely. Yeah, we find these ideas only in Brihat Parashara Hora. And if we go back, to Yavana Jataka, all the vargas are basically used for same things, and the final outcome of everything should be synthesized. Like, for example, there are many delineations in Yavana Jataka for example, the moon in the Saptamshas, in the Navamshas, and ascendant in various divisions, and always they give the physical appearance, So all these should be then synthesized. It's not that Yavana Jataka is okay for Navamsha, you look for marriage, or Saptamsha for children. No, not at all. And also, we don't find this in Brihat Jataka, according to my knowledge.
Yeah, it's not there in Jataka.
Yeah, it's very specific, but I also believe that what's written in Parashara Hora, like says Hora for wealth, and Drekana for siblings. Saptamsha for children, Navamsha for marriage, that those are just, guidelines. They are just guidelines. When he says Saptamsha for children, it's not really just children. But I see it more, also I would like to understand the vargas through geometry and numerology. So if we look at Saptamsha, it's number 7, and also I've demonstrated on my in my article on the Saptamsha on my website. I remember. Yeah, how every varga, especially the harmonic vargas such as Saptamsha and the Navamsha, they produce a polygon inside. So when we connect the different amshas, the same amsha, so in the case of Saptamsha, we connect, say, 7 instances of Aries, 7 Aries Saptamshas, we get a septagon, which is a geometrical form of Saturn.
Yeah.
So Saturn, it doesn't really have anything directly to do with children. And also some use the Saptamsha for marriage also, partnership. And yeah, what does Saturn have to do with this?
And Saturn is also the seventh traditional planet, if you count from luminaries, farthest planet.
Yeah, right. So it's more like varga that indicates sense of responsibility. How much are we able to take responsibility for our actions? The outcomes of our actions. And children, children are a product of sexual intercourse. So here we immediately have, okay, are you able to take this responsibility?
And that's where Saturn comes in.
Yeah, so well-dignified planet, especially planets that, in this case, for example, Jupiter or the 5th Lord or even the 11th Lord, if they are well-dignified in the Saptamsha, then yes, then we have one of the indicators that this person will be probably able to commit and to take responsibility.
And what can you just kind of explain what do you mean by dignified in Saptamsha? Do you mean to say, or let's put it this way, would you use Saptamsha as a standalone chart, or if not, why you wouldn't use that? I think that is the most important thing that we have to address.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
No, I mean, would you use Saptamsha as a standalone chart?
Okay. Yeah.
Or we have had offline discussions, but still I think it is important.
Right. Okay, yeah, this brings us immediately to the question of the two different types of vargas.
Yeah, I think this question kind of came into my mind because you said if those particular planets that you were talking about, Jupiter or the 5th Lord, if they are well dignified in Saptamsha, so what does well dignified in Saptamsha exactly mean?
Okay.
I think that kind of pushes us to that region where we have to analyze whether we can use Saptamsha as a standalone chart itself.
Exactly. Yeah. The classical way would be just to look at the placement of the planet in the Saptamsha, see how dignified the planet is in that sign, what kind of dignity it has, and we also look at the Lord of that sign and the relationship this planet has with its Saptamsha Lord in the Rashi chart. So everything is brought back in the Rashi chart. That's the classical way. The way Varahamihira did it, Kalyan Varma did it. But then it's the other way. So to construct a separate chart, and then some people would also look the aspects to this planet. So maybe, in the Saptamsha, a well-dignified Saturn is aspecting the planet. So, okay, yeah, that can bring some sense of commitment, and so on. So, yeah, the two different approaches. So maybe now it's time that I mentioned that there is not only one type of a varga, but actually there are two types. And unfortunately today, these two types that are quite different are being mixed together. So one type is, I would simply call it a divisional type. It's a type of varga where we simply divide a sign into various number of parts, and we assign a rulership of a planet to each of the parts. For example, such a varga is Hora, when we split the sign in two parts, and we get one part is ruled by the sun and another part is ruled by the moon. And also the same is true for the Drekana, as we find it in Brihajataka and Parashar Hora Shastra. It's the triplicity in Drekana, so the trine lords get the rulership of the three portions of the sign. The Chaturtamsha, when the angle lords get the rulership, it's also this kind of varga. But then when we come to the Saptamsha and the Navamsha, these two are completely different. Because the rationale is different. before we split the sign in various parts, and we assigned the rulerships according to a specific rule. So, for example, for Dracana, we said, okay, so we have three parts in one sign, and we will assign them to the trine lords. And for the Chaturtamsha, to the angle lords. But when we come to the Saptamsha and the Navamsha, what we do is that we're not so much focusing on splitting a sign into 9 parts, although that's what happens, but we're actually splitting the whole circle in 7 or 9 parts. And what happens is that we simply repeat the natural order of the signs from Aries to Pisces 7 times, or in the case of Navamsha, 9 times around the circle. And consequently, you get the 7 or 9 divisions of one sign. But the rationale is different. This is called, in Sanskrit, it's called the Parivriti Varga, or some call it Meshadi Parivriti. Mesh Adi, so from Aries onward. And it's always in natural order, just Aries to Pisces, as many times as we want to divide the circle. In the West, we call this a harmonic chart, or harmonic. So we see that we have now in the Shadvarga or Saptavarga, or even in Shodasha Varga, we have different types of Vargas together in one system, right?
Yeah.
And especially in the Parashari system, these different types are used together in the pointing system called Varga Vimshopaka, where each Varga gets a certain number of points to assess the overall dignity of the planet. And what today astrologers do, they are using all the Vargas as separate charts. This is like a very common practice. But in my opinion, in my humble opinion, according to what I've researched, not every Varga can be used as a chart, because Hora, Drakana, Chaturtamsha, as we find them in the classical texts, are not harmonic Vargas. So they do not indicate any kind of geometrical relationship between 2 planets or points in the main chart. But they are simply divisions in the same way as, for example, in Hellenistic astrology, we have the bounds. It's just different sections of a sign ruled by a different planet. That's it. And we shouldn't really, I think that we should not take this any further. But the Parivriti Vargas, the harmonic Vargas, on the other hand, they indicate this geometrical relationship. And also in the way that they are calculated, especially if we look how the Dvadasamsha was calculated in the Hellenistic tradition, they calculated all the positions to the degree, and they simply imported them back into the Rashi chart or around the chart. So they would judge all the Varga positions against the natal houses, not the houses in the separate chart, you know. The houses were still counted from the natal ascendant, but the Varga positions were placed around or in the chart.
Superimposing.
Superimposing the Varga chart on the main chart, but the main chart gets its main role. The houses remain from the main chart. We don't have another 5th house or another 7th house there in the separate chart. So I think this is very important distinction to be made, that basically, unfortunately, today we're mixing apples and oranges.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important research that you initiated, and I'm kind of guilty of what you're saying. I used to have this standalone chart usage of divisional charts, but I think some of your articles kind of opened my eyes, and I've started looking at the actual underlying factor or the geometrical and astronomical or mathematical relationship that is used to construct a divisional chart. So I think once we understand this difference between the Meshadi and the other technique, like how it is used, just like bounds and decans in Hellenistic astrology, with being specific lots assigned to specific portions of a zodiac sign. So I think the understanding of this difference is kind of crucial in terms of taking this usage of divisional charts further. So as it is, I think we already spoke. None of the classical texts gave the actual rules or steps to kind of interpret the varga charts. So, and we have also gone on to kind of attach some of the topics with some of the varga charts. And do you have some other things to say related to vargas in terms of how it is being practiced today?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe not, but I would like to point out that as I've said many times, it was a surprising discovery that when I found that in the Hellenistic tradition, although the Indian astrological tradition is usually considered as the place to learn the vargas, it is in a Hellenistic tradition that we actually get, I would say, more concrete instruction, technique-wise, how to use the divisions. For example, especially what's interesting is that we get a very nice example of both of these types of vargas used together, because we have the 12th parts, the Decatemoria or the Dvadasamsha. They are used against the bounds, which are similar to the Trimsamshas. The technique, especially Firmicus Maternus, tells this when he finishes every delineation of a planet. After he finishes, he always said, "Don't forget to see the 12th part and the bound it falls in." So we have the 12th part, the Dvadasamsha, which is kind of a quasi harmonic chart. It's not entirely harmonic. It's very specific. But we have this division and all the Dvadasamsha placement put around the chart, and then we actually look at into which bound or Trimsamsha this position falls, and we find the same thing in Yavana Jataka actually.
Okay.
Same instruction, to look at the 12th parts, the Dvadasamshas, where they fall in the bounds. So when we have this instruction, it's totally clear that we have to import the Dvadasamsha positions back into the Rashi chart and judge them against those divisions, the Trimsamshas.
So I think
we can see
no, go on.
Sorry. We can see that the two different types of divisions used together, but they are not the same, because one can be read from its position into another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I think getting exposed to Hellenistic astrology is like it's more of getting clear or finding out the route to kind of use the varga charts. I think that is what I found out when I learned the bounds. Trimshamsas are kind of similar to bounds, but what happens here is that we use Trimshamsa as a standalone chart. But the moment we learn bounds, we have specific portions that is assigned divided into 5, and each is being assigned a ruler. So there it is more of a dignity concept that kind of falls in, and it gives an even more clearer rule or a symbol of interpretation, which makes the job of astrologers easy. I think so. I think this is a problem of transmission, or we have kind of lost some text that kind of give the rules to
Probably.
interpret the Varga charts in Vedic astrology. But the work that Valens and Firmicus have done with regards to bounds and decans in Hellenistic tradition is probably uh, we are fortunate to have their works that still
Hmm.
survive today, so that I think people who are exposed to Hellenistic tradition will kind of find the underlying rationale of how divisional charts can be used in Vedic astrology as well.
Hmm. Sure, I totally agree. Yeah. Because when I found um, these techniques from Firmicus and Valens, um, at first it seemed really strange. What? You cannot do this with the Varga, because I had this, I was living in this box of modern Varga understanding. But then when I tried it in practice, it was like so revealing. Oh yeah, I mean, this makes sense. So now I'm actually trying this with all the Vargas to use them in this way, superimposing them on the main chart. And yeah, I've demonstrated this in my article on the Saptamsha on two charts of kindergarten teachers. And it's quite clear. I mean, it's such an elegant way of using the Varga. I totally fell in love with this method.
Yeah, as it is, I cannot think of doing astrology without bounds today. So that is the
Without
kind
bounds, yeah. Yeah,
that
sure. Me neither. I mean, it's the first thing I look.
okay. Yeah, and it becomes a dignity factor in a chart. For some reason, when I kind of interpret a chart, it becomes a basic rule that I check as a part of dignity itself. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so that kind of changes the entire thing in a chart, how we can interpret it. So I
Right.
think this kind of brings us towards the end of this introductory session of what we are going to do. Uh, Possibly, I think every alternate week. So I think this is going to be fun, and it's going to be a very good research. And I think we should also establish the fact that we are not trying to be dogmatic about what we are doing it here. I think it is just our own view of using Varga charts, and we are not necessarily finding fault with anyone or finding fault with the tradition that has been long existing. So,
Yeah, sure.
if I think you are open to come up with your comments and feedback or suggestion if you have any, and we will just continue exploring without uh, like without thinking anything as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that this is basically just a result of, our own research into the matter. It's not that we're drawing any, definite conclusions,
Yeah,
because it's a complex topic. And yeah, but I really have a desire to understand this, because the Vargas, the divisions, are a very helpful tool. And I can't imagine doing astrology without them. And yeah, so also any feedback is always welcome. So
yeah,
maybe
for
some
sure.
other person has some different insights and they could be valuable.
Okay. So, what is your website and how can people get in touch with you?
My website is Rok Koritnik, astrologer.com. And basically, you just leave a message there and
Okay,
I'll get back to you.
sure. Okay, that's good. And I think you should check out Rock's articles that are always eye-opening, at least from my point of view. So I'd surely recommend checking out Rock's website and for sure his articles. So, and until we see you next time, bye bye.